I'm curious how you thought you guys played last night because it's another great defensive effort. Heck, in 4 games, nobody shot over 30% against you. So, but how did you feel overall your team played last night?
I don't know. I'm trying to give you my unfiltered, my filtered answer, but no, I think there were some really good things. I think we tried to overpass a little bit on some things and get a little too fancy instead of keeping it simple. I feel like we needed to be a little bit tougher, but that's also why you play a team like Wichita State who is smaller than you, but they're really scrappy. And that's what you want to be able to do. And then you're on the road for the first time. And I think you could really tell. I think what it did is it gave us a lot of humility too. And, it's funny as coaches, we're sitting there and we were just having a meeting about, our film and then having to head on the road so fast and all these different things and all the things you feel like you have to work on. And you're talking about a pretty significant win, but it didn't necessarily feel like that. So I think there's a lot of really good teaching moments for us. I thought our guards did another really nice job. I thought Lexi Keys had a really great game. I think Zaya Van, you can really start to see where she's elevating. I think Nevaeh Tott's really finding her groove defensively right now, especially full court defense. So I think she's really taken a lot of pride in that. And we need her to. So I think those are the really positive things that we definitely took out of last night.
Jenny, last time we talked, you were said you weren't overly worried about the 3-point shooting, that would kind of come. You were more about the shot, stuff like that. Are you in the same spot with the free throw shooting right now? And if so, how do you prevent that from becoming like yips or stuff like that throughout a whole team early in a season when you don't have a big body of work this year?
Yeah, no, I think that's an essential part. And it's hard to win games on the road when you aren't making your free throws. So that one is a little bit different than the 3-point shooting. There's not as, you can get a lot of reps up of 3-point shooting in practice and you can get, different looks, but free throws, it's between your ears a lot of the times. And so those are things that we've got to be able to really nail down those routines and spend time outside of practice because as much as you want to spend a lot of time in practice, you just can't find the time this time of year to be able to do that. So you find a very little bit of time that I'm hoping we don't have to make a bigger chunk, but that we'll be able to focus and figure out.
How do you like in a practice setting? I know a bunch of it's muscle memory, but how do you like manufacture the pressure, or can you manufacture the pressure of your exhausted big moment for just like free throw shooting?
Yeah, no, I mean, you get really awkwardly creative. You know what I mean? And so it's like you can put there's certain drills that we'll do where they have to make so many in a row or they can't hit the rim or, somebody has to step up or the whole team runs. I mean, you have some of those kinds of moments where there's the, pressure that the whole team has to make so many in a row. So you try to create those different drill settings, but there's nothing like in a game, you just got like, I don't go around and hit them. I'd like to sometimes maybe think about that, but you don't just foul hard and then get up and then have to do it. So you have to try to simulate in other directions, which is as game like as you can possibly get it. But I do think that there's a lot more to this team, I think, and um, that's an area that we really need to focus on. That and making and finishing at the rim. I think that's an area that we've got to get a little bit more creative as a coaching staff to be able to navigate that more because I don't think we're necessarily finishing the way that we're capable of.
And Jenny, I wanted to ask you about Skyler and the way that she's handled the adjustment in roles from her from what she was asked to do, last year and even the year before, and what she's asked to do now with Reagan on the team. What stood out to you about that, and just the way that she's handled that transition?
Well, I think Sky doesn't necessarily look at it as a transfer of roles. I think she's still playing to people's strengths. I think Sky almost overpasses sometimes, but she's always done that. And we've always seen her do that, which is also what makes her really special and unique because she's such a team player and she just wants to win. And I think there's times where it's her and Reagan are really trying to make those reads together. There is a difference though this year in this team. I think a lot of times we would put Sky in a position a year ago where, okay, nobody wants to shoot at Sky, you do it. And there's less of that now. And I don't even know if it's just having Reagan. I think Sahara's really stepped up in that space. I think Peyton, especially early on, Peyton was still kind of getting her legs under her too. And now Peyton kind of takes some of that too. So we have a lot of people that are willing to step up and do that. And I think a year ago, especially at this time, and especially at the beginning of conference play, we didn't really have that. We were a little rocked. And so it was like, just give Sky the ball and just make something happen. Obviously, Sky can make some pretty incredible things happen, and we haven't been in an end of game situation yet. So, but I don't think her role is as different. I think that's the difference, is that we have more people that have really elevated their own level of their games. And then obviously you've added Reagan.
And then sort of going along with it, I know you've talked several times about just the adjustment of the non-conference schedule and trying to fit all those pieces together. How do you feel overall about how that process is going? No, it's still, fairly early in it, but what have you learned, and how do you feel like that stands?
Well, I feel like we have some pretty solid rotations so far, and there's certain things that I really like. I really like I've talked about this multiple times. I really like Lexi Keys and Zaya Van playing together. I think they can provide a different element for us. We even put them in some situations yesterday that they got to go, a little bit more full court and trapping and kind of playing off of one another. And I think that's going to be fun to watch as time goes. I think Lexi, it brings out a whole different leadership in her. So I like that combination. I really like, we're still working on, kind of that 3-4-5 combination even more. I think we've got kind of the 1-2 combinations down and what we like together. It's really that kind of 3-4-5 that we're still kind of trying to figure out who really plays to each other's strengths and who plays really well, because I think we have opportunities that we can go a little bit more small and play 3 guards. And then we also can get a lot bigger and a lot longer when we have kind of 3 forwards in there. And so that combination that I think we're still in a very early stage.
Appreciate it, Jennie.
Thank you.
Hey, Jennie, I wanted to ask you about going on the road. How big is this week? Because you guys are going to be in Vegas for a long time. How big is this for this team, just to bond and be just together for almost a week? And then in terms of the non-conference schedule, how important it was to play some of these big games, going to Louisville and playing in a hostile environment, prepare you for what's going to be really a tough SEC schedule, especially road games.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's kind of interesting. I was just told this, I think yesterday, because I don't necessarily go count the days, but they were saying that yesterday was the first of 24 days that we were going to be away. And so obviously you're home practicing, but in terms of away games, that's a long time. And we're gonna learn a lot about each other. And then obviously this trip in particular, where you're literally away from home and you're only together that whole time, it tells you a lot about your team, and you better like each other. I mean, that's why, we sit here all the time and you're talking about, okay, who you signing, who you bringing in, you have the transfer portal, you have the NIL stuff, you have all these things that are really impacting. But at the end of the day, your culture is the most essential and important piece because of moments like this, because that prepares you as time really goes on. So you have to recruit a group of people that really love and respect each other. And I think that's what's really coming out in this group, because you cannot convince me that doesn't translate on the court. And so that's something that, yeah, you might not like how so-and-so does, puts their clothes or they're messy or whatever in your hotel room, but you get to know each other on a totally different level. And I think that's what we're all really excited about in this trip.
I want to change gears a little bit. We really keep an eye on football a lot. And we talked to Brent about having weekly meetings with Joe Castiglione, and Joe is really involved in coaching. I want to ask you, do you have often meetings with Joe, weekly meetings in season, things like that? Do you do that with Joe a lot? Do you have a lot of consultations with Joe during season? Do you have meetings with him?
I don't necessarily have a standing meeting with Joe once a week, but we're in pretty frequent contact. So he is a really, I mean, he's a coach's AD. He is somebody that is really invested. He's he's a good person, and he means well, and he's thoughtful, and he wants to be in the know. And he'll have insight on something in women's basketball, and he'll call me and tell me about it. I think it's really, he cares about what your opinion is. He cares about how he can be supportive to what you need and what you want. We all know that, we want football to do really well. And so we all want that to be really supportive. And I can't imagine being in the position that Brent's in, right? Because it's tough. And we all know that it's tough right now. And obviously on a personal level, it's extremely tough. But on a professional level, it's really tough. And then to have somebody like Joe right next to you you wouldn't want it any other way. And that's why there's really good people that come here to Oklahoma and then they stay at Oklahoma because of our leadership. So I think Joe C, I think Joe H, I think they both are really incredible, but it's not, I mean, Joe is supportive and he'll challenge you at the same time. He's not a yes person. He's not just sitting there. He's not soft. He's very powerful. And he means well. And he's very direct, but he is who you want to work for. He's very, very easy to want to do well for.
Jennie, thanks a bunch. Good luck in Vegas this week.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
Jen, I'd like to ask you about Peyton Verhulst, if you don't mind, because she's the best player that nobody knows about. I've been blessed, and I've gone on to a couple of shows that want to talk women's basketball, and they talk about Skyler, they talk about Reagan, and even Lexi Keys. And I'm going, well, wait, before you go, I need to talk about Peyton Verhulst because she's one of the best all-around players in the country. And we saw it last night. She was exceptional last night. Her talent's off the charts, right? I mean, she's got so much more she can get to, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, Peyton is special, and I'm glad that we get to have her another year. So she gets this year and next year.
When you said that, I didn't think you did. So that's great.
Yep. Nope. So she gets this year and next year. So that's even better. And, yeah, and she's just tapped into it, James. I don't think that she's even, I mean, the stuff that we can see her do in practice, I mean, she has such an incredible feel for the game, and everyone on the team, if you're picking teams, you want to be on Peyton's team. She just makes you better. She can just elevate your game. And so I don't disagree that she's not talked about, but I would imagine she's probably a key focal point in a lot of people's scouting reports because she can just do a lot of different things. And so we see a lot of different game plans against her because of that, because she makes us go.
That's interesting. Okay. Because I would have thought that the game plan would be against Skyler or Reagan.
Well, of course they do, but you don't know who to put on Peyton, right? So sometimes people pick her up in the full court. Sometimes, I mean, that's what makes this team so unique is there's different things that we can do. Defensively, she's actually really deceiving as well. Like she gets a lot of different deflections. She's a great rebounder. But yeah, I don't even think she's tapped into it. I agree with you. But I get to see a whole different level too sometimes. So I'm excited for that to really start to come out this year.
Thanks, Jim.
Jennie, you kind of mentioned it right there with Peyton's rebounding. I kind of wanted to ask you about the rebounding efforts as a whole. I mean, through the first few games, you guys have nearly doubled your opponents in rebounding. And I know that's an area you've talked about before in terms of some inconsistency issues, but it seems like, if the turnovers are there, if you're not shooting as well, you've been able to lean on the rebounding. So I just wanted to ask through the first few games, what have you seen from your team's rebounding and specifically just how much has Reagan helped with that?
Well, I think you nailed it right there with your last part. I think Reagan does a huge, she's just a huge rim protector, but I think that also allows us to put people in positions that they have to take shots that maybe they didn't want to shoot either. And so that allows you to then rebound a little bit better. So defensively, I think our first segment of defense, picking up a little bit more full court than we have in the past, just with our depth and our ability to do that. That triggers your rebounding. Our half court defense, I think everybody has elevated their level of defense. And so that translates into finishing the play and getting the rebound. So I think there's a big element. Now, when we go out to UNLV, that team crashes hard. So, I think there's also some people game plan to get back against us And some people don't care about that and they want to crash. So we need to play a UNLV who is going to go right at us, and let's see how good we are rebounding. So I don't know if we've necessarily had a major test in that yet, in terms of really relentless crashing at the boards. I mean, that's what you're going to see in the SEC conference. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, man, we're really good and we boxed out, because we don't. We need to be a lot better. And I also feel like we need to be much more relentless on the O boards. I felt like last night that was a big area of I was going to say disappointment, but it was a disappointment, because I don't think we went and grabbed the ball like we're capable. So that's something that when you go on the road, you don't have a choice. And I think we kind of maybe made that a choice a little bit too much last night.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
Jenny, I wanted to go back to something that you said a little bit ago. You brought up Nevaeh and defense in particular. What are the areas of growth that you've seen out of her, and how much different of a defensive player is she now versus, when you got here?
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, I think there's also a difference because of our depth. And so, she's such a pace setter for us, especially on the offensive end. And so it's hard to be able to do that and pick up full court and to be able to get, direct us into a system, especially when it's new. And, she's really been part of that for 3 years now, going into 4. So I think with our depth, we're able now to even bring her up and be able to start her her defensive effort earlier. I think prior to that, we waited till it came to the half court, and that's hard. Then you really have to hold your ground. You really have to rely on your help defense now. And again, I think a lot of that's also because of our rim protection in Reagan. I think we're better. I think Sky's better defensively. I think Sahara's better defensively. And so you have a lot more help. And so that gives you a little bit more ability to be able to guard. And I think we've been able to see that. I think even when she has gotten beat on some things, she is staying with it. When I think in the past, we've just kind of switched a little earlier than we've needed to. Now we're getting our rotations down a little bit more. So I feel like for Vea, I think her picking up in the full court has been really just a huge asset to her and her game.
Appreciate it, Jenny.
Coach, when you spoke about these different matchups and formations you all can put out there, what kind of goes into the process of learning that about your team? You spoke about Zaya and Lexi Keys being a good duo. How do you go about figuring that out, throughout a season and practice and things like that?
It's funny because we don't do intentional combinations until really when practice begins. So most of our combinations, I just count off at random. And I know that sounds really crazy, but it gets them really competitive. And then they just have to figure some things out. So I don't want them to be robots in the summer. I want them to really tap into their intuitive play. And so that's one strategy that we use. And so then you really get to start to see how people respond to one another, how people communicate, and you watch a lot and you ask a lot of questions. And so you let them play. That's one of the hardest things I think as a coach is that, we're turning over like crazy. And I mean, I even called a timeout last night. I mean, you guys know I don't really use timeouts as much as possible, especially in the non-conference, because I really want them to play and learn and figure the game out. So as they can process and see and understand, okay, there's another team, that's making a run. How do we stop it instead of looking to the bench? I don't want them to look to the bench. I want them to look to each other. I want them to be able to handle that. And so obviously there's time and place to do that and to help out. But I feel like more of my job, especially early on, is to observe. And the more that you observe, you can start to naturally see those things. So what's harder to naturally see is the 5-player combinations that you really, really love. And, just because you start doesn't mean that you're one of the best players on the team. Sometimes we like a different rotation. Sometimes you are the best. Sometimes you aren't the best, so, and I think it depends on the night as well. And I think that's what makes our team so unique and different. I mean, you think about Skyler was, 6th player of the year for 2 years. And thank goodness we had her coming off the bench, because that was such firepower coming off the bench. But at most places she would have started. And for us, she probably could have started. So to me, that's less about what we do. And it's more just literally watching and seeing. And then sometimes you get with game data, you get some of those data points, right? Or if you're tracking some statistics in practice in the summer or when you're scrimmaging, you get some of those statistics, but I never go off of the statistics first. I always go off of what you can see first.
Thanks, Coach.
But that's just what I do.
Coach, I wanted to ask you about Zaya real quick. She scored last night for the second time this season, double digits. How have you seen her improve her game on the court from the beginning of the season to her first away game?
Yeah, I think this is what we're going to see the whole season. I think we're just going to see her go up and up and up. And Zaya just plays, and I think that's one of my favorite things about her is, she gets to play this season with so many veterans. And so they can think for her. She just gets to play. And so she gets a whole year of being able to just step on the floor and play. I think from the very beginning of the summer when it was like she felt like she had to know and learn everything, I think she's really shifted that to just playing. And she's extremely coachable. So when you coach her and you tell her something, she'll understand it or she'll say, I don't understand it. And so that's a coach's dream. The worst thing that can happen is, yeah, I got it, but I really don't understand it, but I don't want to tell you I don't understand it. She's aware enough to know that she understands and what she understands and she doesn't what she doesn't. So you can tell she's just going to get better and better and better.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you.
Hey, Jenny, it's just 4 games in, so I don't know if it's too early to tell this or not.
It is.
But it comes
I
to
don't know your question.
some of the defensive stuff with Reagan thrown into the mix, and then now you've got the ability to play a lot bigger. We've seen, like with the Thunder, the wear and tear of playing super small for a long stretch and just kind of what that takes. Are you seeing that some of those defensive steps for like Skyler, not just that it's another year, but also being able to not play underside or small at spots for like large stretches through like 4 games?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think what's fun about, when you talk about different combinations, you also talk about, a lot of times we think of that on the offensive end, but it's also on the defensive end of things that you can do, so you get KJ who can guard a center, but then also, her length can go out on that perimeter and it's different kind of defense. I've been impressed with Beatrice Culleton and her ability to play with Reagan. I didn't necessarily foresee that early on in the summer, but I think Beatrice has worked a lot to be able to handle some guards as well. And so she can guard a stretch 4, no question. Where she's been used just back to the basket 5s for the most part. And so that's been fun to be able to see that. I think less about really the wear and tear and more about the pace of how we want to play. And so we want to be physical. We want to get up and down the floor. Right now, I'd like to see us exert even more especially because we're playing so many people, that we've got to exert more when we're out there. We're also about ready to go to the West Coast, and I probably am not supposed to say this, so I hope I don't get fined, but the game is different in the West than it is in the South, than it is in the East. They're different styles. It feels as though sometimes they're officiated a little bit different, and so you have to adjust. Now, it always feels different officiated when you're on the road, right? It always feels like that, no matter what sport, right? Everybody's biased, all the things. But when you go on the road and you're in the West, we are going to have to adjust. We had to adjust last night, and I don't necessarily know if we did a great job of that. So those are going to be some things that, especially with, half our team is a pretty mature team, and then we still have some young players in Isaiah, who's getting hand checks, or Sahara, who's, kind of going through people. Not kind of, she is, but those are some things that we have to be able to learn and adjust as well. And so that's what makes the game of basketball so unique and so different, because it is so subjective. And so you just have to be able to adjust as the game is going. So the more awareness you have, the more ability you have to adjust.